Chapter 3. Ain't Nothing Changed. Reth tossed and turned in his childhood twin bed until he decided there was no use forcing himself to sleep. He got up and headed out to the nearest bar. "Great job today, King. The first 2 drinks on me," the bar owner insisted. Reth nodded and ordered the strongest thing he could think of on the rocks. He was having the worst luck getting to sleep, and a strong drink was sure to fix that. "Look who's a drinker now." Reth turned to look at who was talking to him, then turned back at the counter as his drink approached. "No drink for the lady? I'm still a lady in your book, right?" Nia teased. Reth shook his head and nodded to the bartender to get another. He remained quiet as the thoughts rolled through his mind. None he would dare speak out loud. He was always well refrained growing up, and he praised that attitude about himself even if it left him with the short end of the stick. He could always stay level-headed and calm because he screened every thought before he acted or spoke. "Ugh, I hate how composed you are," she grinned. Reth's brows rose, then fell in response. "You're obviously thinking. That face hasn't changed much. Got a little older looking, but it hasn't changed." Nia smiled as she sat beside him and turned to stare at the right side of his face, her nerves unraveling without notice. Reth looked over at her and back to the counter as the bartender rested the next drink in front of him. He slid it over to her, and she stared at it. "What am I supposed to do with this poison?" Reth chuckled, pulled the drink away. He wasn't going to play her argument game, as his mind overflowed with thoughts, so he sat there quiet. "You did great at the donation drive, but if I read your silence well enough, it was also a brutal day for you," she murmured, her eyes sincere and gaze locked on him. Reth slid the drink once more in front of her, and a smirk appeared on her face. It wasn't new to her to drink, but it was new to those from her past to see her drink. Reth chuckled as she took a gulp of the malt whiskey. She also took a gulp that made her tap her chest and cringe. "This is definitely poison, but it gives me some insight into who you are," she coughed. "And it gives me some insight into who you are, too." Nia gave a mirthless smile and looked around. She then turned back to him, just as he finished his glass. She looked down at her own and shuddered. "As a lady, I will have to refuse the rest of this, toxin," she joked. "This is strong enough to take out a horse. Do you really drink this on the regular?" Reth shook his head no, and Nia let out a sigh through her nostrils. "So, you are mute all of a sudden." He chuckled and remained quiet as he kept his focus on the soccer match on the television in front of him. It felt good taking the lead for a change with her. His mind was so jumbled, he didn't want to talk for fear of saying the wrong thing. "It's not my fault, you know, what happened between us. It was just the natural evolution of our friendship," she reflected. "That's not how I remember it," Reth responded, his eyes now staring at their reflection from behind the bar. "Oh, wow. Do you think I wanted that night to happen?" she responded in disbelief. "You decided to try and sleep with an engaged woman, and when she doesn't give you what you want, desert her, and never talk to her for as long as you two shall live." "You know that's nonsense. I never deserted you. You stopped returning my calls and then blocked me. What am I supposed to do when you choose a damn 40-year-old deadbeat over me?" "Oh, do what I always do. Be okay with it and stay quiet," he growled as he stood up. Reth looked down at her as his 6'2" frame now towered over her 5'10" frame. He chuckled lightly as he looked down at his watch. "It was great having a drink with you, but I'm tired and need sleep, so good night." He didn't wait for her response before taking off and making it halfway to the door. He was angry, but he was mainly ashamed and hurt, and those two things he refused to admit. "Reth, wait. Why is this happening?" Nia asked as she caught up to him by the door. "Simple. The natural evolution of our friendship, shit." She stared at him for a moment, unsure of how to respond to her own words, so she remained quiet and softly laid her hand on top of his. Reth didn't budge, nor did his stern face shift. He simply blinked and pushed open the door with his free hand. Nia's brows gathered to the center of her face as her head tilted back in confusion. She went to speak, but her mouth hung open slightly in shock. She let out a soft sigh and stepped back, and Reth clenched his jaw and made his way out the bar. Reth knew this was the opportunity he was looking for to make amends and maybe finally get to finish what they started that night in college. But after reflecting on their friendship, he wasn't sure having another person to care about was worth the effort. Nia walked out the bar behind him, preoccupied with thoughts, as she walked towards her rental that was awkwardly right in front of Reth's car. She looked up at him once more, his glance empty, but hers heavy. He froze for a moment as her beautiful big brown eyes held his attention as they typically did. For a moment, his stern face showed emotion as he wished things could be different. He gulped and clenched his jaw, then tapped his key fob, and the car unlocked, shaking Nia from her thought as she heard the beep. When I saw you on stage tonight, it all felt like yesterday, when we were kids running around each other's neighborhood or hanging out at school causing trouble. We were each other's rock. Anything I needed, whether it be a hug, help with homework, advice about guys, or to vent about my parents, you were there. Remember when you were my first makeup client? She snickered. Your only client, he corrected. She smiled and walked closer to him, but still kept her distance and stared at him with soft eyes. He sighed and let his head hang. I'm headed by my mom's house. I'm sure she would love to see you, he responded. Sure. Same spot? Ain't nothing changed, he smiled as he got into the car. She pulled into the driveway, and Reth walked to her car and opened her door. Now I need you on your best behavior, he smiled. Aren't I always? She winked. Reth chuckled and walked ahead of her to open the door. Ma, you have a ghost, he called out. Nia gave him a playful push, then entered the house. Wow, your mom hasn't changed much, huh? Everything is just how I remembered it. Wait, Mr. King's boots and coat are missing. The comment stung a little, but he gave a small smile and let it slide since he didn't want to discuss his father. He walked into the living room where he turned on the table lamp and relaxed on the chair across from the couch. Nia walked in behind him, but soon stopped in her tracks. Now you know not to play those games in my house. I don't have any spirits in here, Charlene uttered. Ain't nothing changed, Nia smiled as she caught Charlene's glance. Ooh, my favorite daughter, she squealed as she rushed over to Nia. The two embraced each other tightly for a few seconds. When they released each other, Charlene fluffed Nia's curly fro and shook her head with a smile. My goodness, I never thought I would see the day you changed your crown. I like it. I like it, she smiled. You sure have changed. Charlene cooed as she pulled Nia away so she could get a better look. Girl, you got a booty. I guess you finally ate that island food you always talked about. She chuckled. Yeah, I went back home for a few years. I needed to get away, Nia admitted. Reth perked up in his chair, hearing the news. I don't see any wedding band or engagement ring. Did your parents really call everything off? Charlene asked. Wait, no, Nia responded. I called things off. My parents had nothing to do with me moving forward. If anything, they hold me back. Don't say that, Charlene scolded lovingly. Us parents just want the best for you kids. Sometimes it isn't the right kind of best. Nia shrugged and remained quiet as she took in the sight of Charlene. I hope you know you're still my second mom, she smiled. But of course, Charlene smiled. I still can't get over how much you've grown up. You never visited after high school, but I'm happy you did now. You two enjoy your night, and as usual, the party's done at midnight. Nia smiled and agreed and gave Charlene one last hug. She watched as she made her way back to her room, then looked over at Reth and shook her head. Mama still looks the same, How? Magic is my guess, he responded as he got up. She chuckled, then walked the room, taking in everything that felt like the good old days. She squealed and ran over to the record player to see an old Marvin Gaye record laying in it. She switched on the power, and before she could lift the head shell, Reth interrupted her. That hasn't been played since my mom and dad's last booty call. I don't think you want to risk that karma falling on you now. Nia cut her eyes and let the needle sit on top of the record, and it started to play. She swayed to the beat and remembered a day when the lyrics didn't hit so deep. I miss being a kid, she confessed with a frown. I don't. Life for me is more fulfilling as a successful adult, Reth insisted. Nia shook her head and picked up the stack of albums next to her and started to thumb through them. Oh, we should play some Zapp and Roger. That was always your favorite album, or any Prince's joint. And you were an MJ sheeple, he joked. Don't hate on the king, okay? I can't hate on a king. It's my name. Nia smiled and placed the albums back down and headed for the photo albums his mom had stacked in the corner of a dusty bookshelf. Oh, we're about to go down memory lane, she beamed. Reth watched as she slowly walked over to him, an ear-to-ear grin already on her face as she skimmed the first few pages. His eyes scanned her smooth cocoa brown skin, and he quickly remembered how soft her skin was under his fingertips. He slowly blinked, trying to kill his yearning, but still shots of the last time he kissed her swirled in his head. Look at this. I didn't even realize I had buck teeth for so long. She laughed. Look at those pearly whites now, he complimented. She smiled and kept flipping the pages. How did people find me so attractive back then? I was a string bean with a mop for hair. I guess we did make up the number 10. I never truly realized that you were big until now. I think my drink is kicking in and I should head to bed. Oh, don't be such a softy. You look nothing like this guy. Plus, you never slept then, so I'm sure you don't sleep now, she teased. He sighed and sat beside her, trying to keep his focus on the photos in front of them. This picture was taken in your room. Look at you and your dad creating a map for your wall. Does it still look the same? She asked. My mom hasn't moved anything, he laughed. It's like a creepy museum or shrine of my adolescence. Wait, everything is as it was when we left for college? King Tut's pyramid got nothing on this, he chuckled. Let's go, she insisted. Reluctantly, Reth got up and walked her to the rinky staircase leading to his room. You should go up first in case the stairs give out. I could catch you, he directed. Same lines from when we were kids, she laughed. It didn't work then and it won't work now. I'm always a gentleman unless begged not to be, he grinned. Nia shook her head and rolled her eyes. She turned towards the staircase and carefully began to climb them. She stood in awe of how well kept everything was. Mama didn't change anything, she gasped as Reth made it up the staircase. He chuckled and watched as she admired his room. Nia stood in the center and took several 360 spins with her smile growing with each spin. This is so crazy. I can see me there by the window looking through your scope, and you over here finding the positions of the stars, and your mom threatening us about going to bed or I had to go home. Worst of all was us practicing how to dance in this mirror. Man, I had no game when I was younger, he laughed. Oh my gosh, remember that dance move you tried to come up with? Nia laughed as she tried to imitate a young Reth. The funny part was your dad randomly popping up and catching you. She broke down in laughter. First off, you're doing it wrong, and I was a genius back then, just ahead of my day, he defended. We all had our first slow dance up here under the stars. Nia reminisced as she spun in a circle. Reth chuckled as he heard Marvin Gaye's I Want You play through the open staircase. He walked over to her and took her hand and spun her around. She smiled at him, and he pulled her close and they danced to the music. Reth found his courage and locked eyes with the nervous Nia and kissed her. She wanted to pull away, but found herself lost in the moment like she did all those years ago. Reth felt her press into him, so he picked her up and sat her on his windowsill. This time, there would be no one to interrupt them. Nia moaned as he laid butterfly kisses on her neck and worked his hand up her shirt. They locked eyes right before she pressed her lips against his, allowing his tongue access to hers. She felt her pants slacken and remembered that this was not the path she intended to travel. She tried to resist, but found herself under the trance of his fingers as they caressed her flower generously, sending waves of heat through her body. Reth picked her up and walked over to his love seat, where he sat and allowed her to straddle him. His manhood would rub against her flower, causing pleasure to strangle any restraint in her body. Reth felt his pants slacken, and her hands eagerly making a dash for the source of her desire, and he cleared his throat and pulled away. "What's wrong?" she asked, concerned with his sudden withdrawal. "I have so many things going on in my head. I just don't know if this is the best thing to do right now." "Wait, the ladies' man is turning down prime meat?" she joked, looking him in his eyes. "I just don't want this to be a mistake or a fantasy fling. I don't know," he responded, picking her up so he could stand. "Is this about that night? We don't have to reopen shut doors. Let's just enjoy the now," she explained as she tipped him back into the chair. "Beyond that, though, I did something by not doing something," he sighed. "You're killing the mood," she mumbled as she laid kisses on his neck. "Promise you'll forgive me." "I promise," she smiled, staring into his eyes. "There was a bet." "Our clique was always betting, so what?" she scoffed. Kelroy and the guys made a bet that no one could get you to forget about your old man for a night. The aim wasn't to make you cheat necessarily. It was just a stupid bet, he admitted. Nia climbed off of Reth and shook her head in disbelief. Reth stood up and tried to ease the tension. "Honestly, for me, it was more than a bet. I finally had exactly what I needed to act on how I felt. And plus, I wasn't going to let anyone else try something stupid with you." "What the hell, Reth? So you decided to be the one to try something stupid? I thought we were supposed to have each other's back. You should have discouraged that bet or come and tell me about it. How am I ever to know if anything we have isn't some bet? Here I am fighting my best judgment and letting you into a part of my life I had not engaged in for years because I felt guilty for not trying with you, but I was just a game to you. My relationship was just a game to you?" she argued. "It wasn't like that. I know it sounds messed up, but the winner got $1,700 and I needed it. I had a tuition payment to make and my mom had to decide whether to pay the mortgage or my tuition so I could graduate, so I saw a great opportunity. When you left that night, I wasn't going to tell anyone, but Kilroy had already seen," he added. Nia shook her head as her face hardened. "I really felt bad for where we were for all those years, but God knew you weren't to be trusted. You ruined my damn relationship with Zuma? He thought I was this floozy that had to be controlled because I couldn't control my urges?" Nia yelled. "Look, what I did wasn't right, but it was more than money. You know how messed up my head was because you would play these sick games with me. No, you do not get to blame me for being a jerk." "I'm not blaming anyone, but I was sick of being your sweet little friend. You know I wanted more, and when I tried, you would send off these hints that you weren't interested. And the messed up part was when I tried to distance myself from you, you came back being all flirty and shit, acting as if you wanted me. I screwed over women because I wanted to make sure I was always available for you. You don't get to do this to me," Nia yelled as she buttoned her pants and headed for the stairs. Reth cut her off and put her over his shoulder and sat her on the couch. "You get to listen because you knew what you were doing. Darcy McBean, you ruined that for me our junior year of high school because you thought she was coming between us. Sophomore year in college, you told me that Sharon was messing with Cody and they weren't. They were cousins, like blood cousins, and I screwed that up. Oh, but you go on dates and even lose your virginity to that pedophile and have the nerve to tell me how I should live my life? He growled. Screw you, Reth. I don't owe you a damn thing, and you don't owe me anything. Is this how you slept with all those girls? Guilt them into taking their panties off for you when you don't get your way? Please, if I didn't stop us, I would have you moaning my name and coming on my dick. Don't act like you don't want this as much as I do. I don't want this. I didn't want any of this, and that's why I stayed away all those years. You don't understand what you did. What you did turned my life upside down. Zuma was my future. And you were supposed to be mine. You kept me in that damn box and played me for years, and you don't see the karma? He sneered. Nia stood up and stared at Reth, her eyes cold and face emotionless. Reth knew he pushed her to the edge, but now they were even. If I ever see you again, it would be too soon, Nia declared coldly. Reth lowered his head and moved to the side so she could pass. There wasn't much more he could do to ruin the moment, and nothing he could say to make it better.